It's crazy to think that the very first Mission Impossible is almost 30 years old at this point. That Tom Cruise, at the age of 62, at the time of writing this video, is still doing those crazy stunts. And that nearly 3 decades of spycraft, heavy action, high-octane heists and face mask-peeling goodness has now reached its conclusion. But how do you wrap up a series of movies that have defined action cinema for so many years in a satisfying manner? And is that truly impossible? My mission, should I choose to accept it, is to try to determine whether Tom Cruise and his impossible mission force succeeds or not.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
This movie picks up where the last film, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, left off, with Ethan Hunt, played by Tom Cruise, in the possession of the key to the lost Russian submarine that contains the source code of the malevolent AI, the Entity, that has always been 2 steps ahead of Ethan and his friends in the last film. Now, after discarding its human companion Gabriel, played by Isai Morales, it now wants to wipe out humanity by taking over every major nation's nuclear arsenal and end it in a massive extinction event, all while Gabriel wants to control the Entity to create his own perfect world. Ethan and his team must now race against time to get to the sunken submarine in the frozen sea, get the source code to destroy the evil AI, all before the world is destroyed in an all-out nuclear disaster. While this movie might be a little lighter on action than a lot of its predecessors, the scope of this film certainly lives up to the Mission Impossible name, and in some regards surpasses previous entries. Even if the film features less run-and-gun action, this movie might be the most tense out of every film so far in the franchise. Every Mission Impossible has running timers on bombs, incredible heists and flight takeoffs, but this movie has a constant countdown in the form of more and more nations losing control of their nuclear arsenal to the Entity that makes every delay feel all the more costly. Especially the underwater scene is arguably one of the most tense scenes in the entire franchise. Also, with this basically being the second part of the final story, having some more actual consequence in the form of important characters dying not only ups the stakes, but also makes this finale feel even more real and important, not just for the world in the movie, but personal for Ethan. That being said, I think the scope of the story might just be a little too big for Mission Impossible. The movie almost crumbles under the pressure of the entire human race being on the line. In every other Mission Impossible, there were always many lives at stake, but the threat seemed somewhat contained and almost invisible to anyone but the team, who made sure that the world was saved. There is something almost poetic about the IMF saving the world over and over again, but doing it completely from the shadows and not getting recognized for it. Also, where most other villains had some personal connection or philosophical opposition to Ethan, it's hard to get invested in an enemy that has no personality because it's an artificial intelligence. And while I can understand the appeal of having an AI as the threat in our current climate with the advancement of the technology and the fears where it might take us, I wanted a more personal and intimate villain on perhaps a smaller scale. In that sense, I feel like Mission Impossible Fallout would have served better as the bookend of the series. Speaking of bookending, this film does a great job of tying the history of the Mission Impossible films together once again by having plot points from the very first movie inform certain characters in this film, making this very much feel like the end of the entire 30-year-old story. However, it does it in some terms subtly, while others are very much on the nose. The movie basically starts with a videotape that recaps a lot of Ethan Hunt's previous exploitations, interspersed with footage from older films. And it does so multiple times, which I think is a little lazy, coming from the team that gave us some superb action movies in Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation and Fallout. I would also be hard-pressed not to mention that this movie, more so than any other, are too Ethan-focused. I miss the team dynamic and series-defining heists where everyone had a role to play in subterfuge and stealth. The team here is split up for far too much of the movie, and some characters like Benji, played by Simon Pegg, gets too little screen time, and a breakout character like Paris from Dead Reckoning, played by Pom Klementieff, is woefully underutilized compared to what we saw in the previous outing. Whilst not perfect, with some pacing issues and too long of a runtime, it is another solid entrance in a movie franchise that is now 8 movies deep, and that is saying something compared to others that managed to get this many movies out in their own franchise. And despite everything in the marketing and the movie setting this up to be the final installment, I would not count out Tom Cruise and director Christopher McQuarrie getting another idea for another mission. With all I've laid out, I did enjoy the film. It just didn't live up to the expectations that I had. But I would say it lands on a solid 7 out of 10 for me. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.
What exactly is your plan?
Heads up! Heads up! Here's another one.